The next chapter with Prim Siripipat is a production of iHeartRadio. Hey everybody, it's Prim. Welcome to the next chapter presented by Baron Davis and Slick Studios. This week's guest is former UCLA and NFL tight end and ESPN college football analyst, Charles Arbuckle. So C-Buck and I worked together for a number of years during our time at ESPN while working on First Take college football. And whether it was before, during, or after our shows, we often talk about things other than sports, including his family, his children, thinking about grad school, his MBA, also his 20-something years of work in the bio-pharmaceutical industry. And we always had something to talk about beyond sport. And another thing I knew about his journey is also how tough it was for him to leave the game of football, something that's been a part of his life since he was a little kid growing up in Texas. And what stands out to me from this conversation is the dark moments he experienced shortly after he retired from the NFL in his late 20s and wondering what he's going to do with his life and questioning his existence without football and without his athletic identity. I certainly think this conversation extends beyond sport because anytime we lose an identity and don't really know what's next for us and what our purpose is in life, it can bring up a lot of existential questions and also just a lot of confusion and dark feelings. And I think that's something most people will struggle with at some point in their lives. But C-Buck was able to find his way out of it. And so I hope you're able to learn something from his journey and from today's conversation. So without further ado, here's Charles Arbuckle. C-Buck, it's so great to have you on. You know, we got the opportunity to chat and you came on the show, but I wanted to bring you back because so much has happened over the past several years. I think the last time we did the first interview was back in 2019. Yeah. Since then, we had the pandemic, we got stuck in our homes, we had the quarantine, you've had some movement in your professional life, you're playing golf, but outside of the golf realm, can you just tell everybody in your own words just a little background about yourself and also what you do today?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been in the pharma or healthcare space for 20 plus years. I mean, when I finished playing ball, I played in college, played in the pros for about 5 years. And when I finished, I started doing some things to set myself up so I could get into pharmaceutical sales. So I started out as a sales rep for years. And then the last 12 to 13 years, I've probably been in management in some capacity. And so while doing all of that, I've still kind of maintained an opportunity to do some broadcasting. And that's how we met. It was, doing some games first and then starting to do a lot of studio shows. So I like that part because it keeps me close to the game. And, probably in 2017, I got the wild idea of saying, hey, maybe I should go back to grad school, which I'm doing and get my MBA. And I'm almost finished, which is great because I need to complete that and get done with it. But, with that said, it's just given me an opportunity to, expand my thought process, how I work, why I do some of the things in business, why business works the way it does. And then it's also helped me be a better analyst of things and looking objectively and analytically at how things work. So, that's kind of where I am now. Just and I've always kind of played golf, but I've started here lately to do it again, just because I have I don't have the free time, but I'm starting to figure out if I don't start learning now, it's gonna get worse. It's gonna get worse. So yeah, that's where I am.
Well, in addition to working on your golf game, you obviously have a lot going on. You and I were talking the other day and we catch up from time to time. You're juggling dad life, you're juggling husband life, you're juggling, school life. You joked around, you're on the, what do you call it? Like the 10-year plan. But nonetheless, I mean, juggling class with like full-time, you're working full-time. You're also, heading into the college football season. You're going to be traveling all over the place, right?
Yeah,
For
yeah.
ESPN. So that's a lot of things on your plate. Have you always been that way?
Yeah, pretty. I mean, I have. I think the one thing that's been good about calling games, it's only on the weekend. Now you have to prep
Mm.
during the week, and that means. But for me, for work, I travel for work, but usually Monday through Thursday, or Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. But that's it's fine because I know how to do that now. I understand it. And with school, I'm almost finished. It's a 10. Our terms run 10 weeks, so that's been actually pretty good because as much as it's compiled, it's still certain things you have to get done, like the papers and certain things. And I'm out of the accounting classes now. If I had any more accounting classes, I would be, want to kill myself. But I can write a paper all day long. So that part is easy because I'm at that back end. I'm just taking a few electives. I'm literally going to be finished. I think I have 2 classes. So
Wow.
yeah.
That's awesome.
But I finally had to just say, okay, let's finish this. I did have the 10-year plan initially, and then I just said, no, let's hunker down and kind of get this thing done so I can be done with this and say I have it. I've completed it, right? But I've always kind of figured out how to, allot for time. Sometimes it can get a little hairy, but for the most part, it's pretty. I'm pretty good about scheduling and not letting the broadcasting or school interfere with work. You just have to figure out how to do that and how to manage it.
Yeah, you've always, that's the one thing that always fascinated me about you. And I think also why we became such good friends. I was like, gosh, this guy is so well-rounded and you do so many things. And I think a lot of times in sports media and broadcasting, I think athletes do a lot of things, but it's easy to get hyper-focused. It's easy to get sucked into the sports broadcasting space.
Yeah.
There's this urge to want more. Like, it's being in the limelight, getting those opportunities, getting that feedback, wanting more shows, wanting more opportunities. But you've always kind of seemed to really maintain this balanced sense of motivation in all these different realms. Are you shaking your head because is that off the mark, or you think that
you're on the mark? But I think part of it is because if you're not given, or like if you don't get selected at a certain point, like this broadcasting thing is like sports to me. I've always told people, well, why aren't you doing this high profile game? Or I said, because sometimes you have to have people to choose you to do that. And I'm not saying that anybody that they choose isn't good, but sometimes when you get people in those spots, they keep them there or they stay there, and there's not a whole lot of room to move people out. So what I've learned a few years ago when I did start doing a lot more and said, hey, maybe this is the time to focus on highlight, becoming a broadcaster full time and doing that. I had some conversations with a few mentors, and they were like, look, this is a great industry, but just be honest and cautious because there are certain things that are out of your control. Be the best that you can be when you show up, but there's still going to be the next shiny penny or somebody that they have in front of you, and that may not change. It wasn't easy to hear that, but it was good advice as you start getting a little bit older and they start having younger people that can come in. So it's just like this week at the college football seminar. It's great to go in a room full of guys that I know I can do as good a job of as they can, but I don't sit around anymore and say, probably like my younger self, let me be competitive with him and him. No, I'm going to be the best that I can. And I think I don't know if I'm well-rounded. I've just matured and learned, okay, I'm going to do the best thing I can in this lane right here. And if people recognize it, I'm going to keep getting opportunities. If they don't, okay, that means I have to be prepared to do other things as well. And I think that's almost by necessity has been that way for me.
It's so interesting. The way you described the interaction and relationship with an experience in sports broadcasting kind of reminds, some of the descriptors that you use reminds me of the transition out of sport of just, do the best that you can and not always, of course, there's that competitive element where we have to compete with our peers and other athletes. Obviously there's only so many spots in whatever game that we're playing, but ultimately it becomes a battle against ourselves. And so I'm curious about, you said maturity. So what did you learn in leaving football that you now apply to how you just deal with various obstacles and transitions today?
I think resiliency. I mean, that's not an easy transition. I've talked to guys, and we were talking about it this past week. I mean, whether you play 14 years in the league or 20 years or two games, there's something about that rush of running out of the tunnel, being in the locker room, the opportunity to compete every single day with and against guys. And when you leave it, there's nothing else that's going to replace it. That's like when you said earlier, what replaced that? I can go pick up softball. I can go play basketball with the guys at the Y, but it's never going to be the same level of competition as blocking Cornelius Bennett or Bruce Smith one week, and then the next week Andre Tippett or Lawrence Taylor. There's nothing that you're going to ever find that replaces that, and that's why I think so many of us struggle. There's a kindred spirit when you are around guys that have played, or women like you, or men that have played at a high level, because you know what that looks like and what it feels like. But the hardest part for all of us is you also know the ones that struggle, and you know your struggle when you leave the game, or when you walk away from it, or when you're not chosen anymore. Like, you're not the kid on the corner that gets picked anymore. It's a lot. It's a lot goes into that mentality, and that's why guys, I think, struggle with it so much.
What was your experience like? And you and I have talked a little bit about it, and you've touched on it, but what were your struggles like? Because I think, and that's not to imply that you did struggle, but I think most athletes, maybe not all, but I would say 99.9% have some sort of issue in leaving sport. So what were your struggles?
Yeah, I think it's funny. Every guy you talk to, no matter how smooth the transition was, whether they become a high-level executive for a company, or they've been able to work in corporate America for years. The hardest part for me was, figuring out, okay, that identity that I have to lose it. I can't let it immerse me. I can't let it suffocate me. I can't let it almost want me to take my life. And I think, I've talked to so many guys that I thought, hey man, they had it together. They were in the same boat, but they were struggling in a silo, because as a ball player or athlete, you're taught, okay, you just work through it. You'll work yourself out of it. But, the good thing for me was, we had a really strong NFL PA association in Indy. And then also just my faith, being able to go to, my former chaplain and really talk through things about what that was like. Because while you think you're the only one, they've dealt with that with other guys that have come through the program or left. And so I think those are the things that helped me. There were some dark times where I felt like, hey, why am I here? Why do I need to be here? And I can remember laying on my office floor one day thinking, do I really want to keep going at life like this? Has this been all that life's given me? But I had a young son, I had a wife, and then in the future, a daughter. So I think it was, I'm glad I was able to get the help and support to understand that, that your life isn't over when you're done with the field. And for a while, I would kind of let people know I played, but I was determined more to say, no, I didn't play ball. I try to kind of go away from it so you could show people that you had other attributes and skills.
That last part that you just mentioned about not sharing with people that you played ball, as you know, Seabuck, this is like some of the research that I'm doing, and it's something that I didn't really think about, but there is a lot of research to show that societal pressure disallows or does not allow athletes, especially male athletes, to move on from sport, because you're walking down the street and it's like, oh my God, Seabuck, what's going, UCLA, like I remember you. And there are those moments, or if you're in an interview and they look on your resume and it's like, oh, wow, played in the NFL for, a number of years. And that becomes the centerpiece and the center point of your interview. And you don't really talk about anything else. So there's that societal pressure that like shapes your experience, and it makes it harder to kind of leave sport. Now, you also mentioned about being in your office, experiencing some dark moments. And this is part where I want to kind of like slow down the conversation, because I think athletes listening to this, it's so easy to skip over those moments. And so I just kind of want to like slow down and talk about that. But can you share maybe one, or can you remember a dark moment, a lowest point where you really hit rock bottom? You're like, I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, I think it was just, like I said, just some contemplation of, do I really want to continue to live like this, or live with a part of not having the identity? How do I let that go? How do I, and it wasn't just you end up on the floor in your office or sitting there contemplating it. It's moments that lead up to it. It's just, rejection, maybe for you not getting a job that you thought you were qualified for, just the things. I think it was, as I look back, it might have been the rejection on top of rejection on top of rejection of, hey, he's not qualified for this, but we love him because he's a former athlete. And when you don't get hired, or your business deals aren't going the way you want to, it's a lot of numbers. It was a number of different things. I don't think it was just one. But in that moment, I started thinking, okay, no, let's slow this down a little bit. Let's think about all the times you had rejection in sports and how you were able to come back. And that's why I said making sure I reached out to people, because when I went into a group of guys similar to me and talking to them one-on-one or in a group, those were things that were shared. Or, going to your chaplain, and then also eventually going to, seek out help, just to say, help me through this, because I know, my mind is playing a video and a dialogue that I know is not true, but how do I kind of, peel that back and focus on the things that are a positive, and the things that I know in life have been really good for me. Yeah.
How old were you when
I think,
this?
Go ahead.
How old were you when this happened?
95, 96. So, my last year was 95, so it had to be around 1996 before I really started doing broadcasting. I mean, I was doing local things in the area, and before I kind of had my place, because I was still thinking, do I want to play football? But it's funny, I knew when I was going to stop playing, and I tell the story all the time. I was on the bus. I had a workout I got released by the Colts during the season, but I got a workout, or I got a call about a workout in Carolinas, because one of the former coaches was here. I was there in the off season, and it was me and Andre Reed. And, they would work out, and the workout I thought went well, but I was on the bus, and they, Bojangles is a big sponsor, and I think the owner owned Bojangles. So they gave a Bojangles box of chicken. And I opened the chicken, and I'm like, I'm not going to do this anymore. I think I'm done with this. I think I'm good. And it wasn't the Bojangles. The chicken was actually pretty good. But I told Dre Reed, I said, man, I can't do this anymore. I think it's time for me to move on. He ended up playing 14, 15 years, probably Hall of Famer. But it was just, in that moment, I was like, my body, it was hard to get up to do that every single game, yet alone think about going through another year of that crap. I just said, hey, I'm done. I retired after that.
After talking to dozens of athletes, it is quite funny when there's a lot of athletes that remember the moment when they were just done. And for those that just get fatigued, like they just wake up one morning and they're training, or they're at training camp, or they're doing PT, and it's like, do I want to do this anymore? I'm just tired. So, but that moment for you was on the bus eating Bojangles.
Yeah, eating Bojangles. I'll still go by and get a breakfast sandwich occasionally just to reminisce. But I knew, like, I had so many knee injuries leading up to that, and in spite of being like 1.5 leg strong, I still made it to the league. So I said, okay, this is getting tough. This is getting tough just to go to camp every year, sign a waiver to say, like, if you don't pass the physical because of your knee, we'll cut you. I had to do that every year after my first year in the league. So when you start getting it, when you know that, like, and eventually that knee became a knee replacement. So, hey, you know it's going to get there. I couldn't do it anymore. My body was just like, as much as you love this game, that game ain't going to love you the same way back.
Yes. Yeah. That's so powerful. So around that time, you were about 28 years old, roughly, in your late 20s.
27. Yeah, 27.
Okay, 27, 28. And what did you do after that bus ride? Did you end up doing any more workouts, or that was the last day?
That was it. I stopped. I mean, I kept working out, but I didn't do any more workouts for teams. And then I kind of started making the transition. I got a call from the folks at the Colts to say, hey, we have some opportunities. Would you like to do some preseason television? Which I said, yeah, I'd love to. And I was already doing some post-game radio stuff with them occasionally, and I ramped that up. I was working my pharma job in sales, which was a perfect fit for sports because I didn't have to go into an office. I was transitioning into that field. I was still in sales, but in another industry. So yeah, it gave me a chance to kind of cut my teeth on high school football, local college football. I mean, Wabash and DePaul in Indiana is a really big D3 game. And then I started getting opportunities with ESPN Regional at the time to do Mid-American Conference games. And I think that's what really helped me because I started to get chances to go meet with coaches again. A lot of them have been coaching when I was playing, so I knew those guys, and then started to do occasionally doing some NFL games when, the color analyst for the Colts couldn't make it, I could step in. So I got a chance to get back around football, which was probably good for me. It made me not think like some guys, I hate this game, but I always, even when times weren't great, I still liked the game. I didn't have that sense of I hate this game and it treated me wrong, because I can never say that. But yeah, that's kind of what I started doing, and just rebuilding a career.
So in many ways, your relationship with football was not damaged, as you mentioned, because some athletes, some NFL players walk away from the game and they end up hating the game, not necessarily because of football itself, but I think the business side of it, I think it sours their experience. So you walked away still having a relatively positive relationship with football. So when you were having that dark moment and you were questioning what was next for you, and it almost sounds like were you thinking about ending your life, or was it just a question of what you were going to do with your life?
If I had put that thought in my mind, I could have at that time. I can't say, I was going to do this, but there were thoughts of, should I? So I didn't go there, luckily. But I think you said it best. The game, I didn't love the politics and the business side of the game. I never liked that. And that's the worst part of the NFL. But the part that you miss the most is the camaraderie with the guys, which I think I was able to get through those meetings and the retired players getting back together, doing different functions, because it almost became your locker room. Just like a locker room 2.0 when you're not there anymore, but you at least have a group of guys when you get together once or twice a month to do functions and then started doing the golf tournaments and different things where you'd be around people where you can't say I hate this game, because the reason you're there is because of the game that got you there. But the love, but that part was great. I mean, the part that you hate the most, and I hate the most, is the business side and some of the cutthroat nature of the game. That's just the reality.
So, the business side of it very much sours the experience, regardless of what sport you're in. I think it's that transactional nature that really leaves a bad taste in a lot of players' mouths. I think really, mostly speaking about revenue generating sports, I think that's where, like the football and basketball and, maybe baseball, soccer as well. But
and one point to that, Prim, I think that's the one thing we have to be cognizant of. And I've heard it this week at our college football seminars. There's been so much talk about money, and NIL and all of this. But there was one person that spoke and they said, hey, we need to think about the players and the participants, because as of late, we've had a lot of college age kids and even some high school kids that have done something and committed suicide, have had some, mental issues around this. And when he said that, he said it, but I was still thinking, we don't say that enough. Not when we are now going to have kids that have to fly across country. It becomes like you're in a job. And I hope that colleges will continue to get, because we didn't have those support systems as much growing up. I know I didn't, not when I was in school. I mean, I was lucky to meet Dr. Parham because I was on the West Coast where things were moving a lot quicker. And probably another reason why I didn't sour to the game because of relationships like that. But I think we really need to look at that, because there are a lot of kids suffering, or young adults suffering more so than we know, and they probably do it in silence. And I hope all these programs with this money that they're talking about, they put enough back around mental health.
Yeah, I think that's such an important conversation, and I'm glad you brought it up, because I do want to talk about that. It's funny. I was just on hopefully this isn't too much of a digression, but something I'm obviously really passionate about. But I had a conversation, I was on a podcast that was connected with the NCAA, and the conversation about student athlete mental health was the emphasis, but there was some caution about wanting to talk about the suicidality and the recent incidents, because there was a concern of not just, I think, maybe a little bit of liability, but I think they were worried about this contagion effect. And honestly, this is beyond my training. I don't have the answers to that, but it is my personal opinion that I've been a part of that generation that didn't talk about it, and that didn't work. So I am less worried about the contagion effect. Yeah. In that, if we are talking about suicide, is that going to prompt somebody else to think about it? I mean, it's already out there. So I would rather talk about it and talk about the options and resources. And so listen, like in full disclosure, I have had suicidal ideations before. They were passive, in the sense of similar to yours, where it's just a fleeting thought. There's no there's no plan of intent. There's no plan to act on it. So, and those, I will just say that having those passive thoughts of questioning what your purpose is, what you're going to do next in life, what is the meaning? What's the meaning of you being here? Those things are normal during stressful moments. And that's something that I learned during my clinical training this year, and having to work with, having my first set of clients. And my supervisor mentioned, like, hey, this is important to let people know, like, this is actually normal during periods of stress. But if it gets to a point where it's like, okay, there was an act, there was intent, there was a plan, and so in that moment, when you were questioning my identity, what I was going to do you remember just like the general feeling of what were you feeling in that moment?
I think what I remember is just, saying, God, why am I feeling this way? I remember asking that question. And then, it was almost like a voice that said, "Get up, man, you're okay." And I remember it was almost one of those, like, you're going to be fine. There's going to be struggles, but you're going to be fine. It was a calm. It wasn't, like you said, I didn't have a plan of I'm going to go and do X, Y, or Z, but it was just a thought of how do I keep going if I don't feel like I'm whole, like I'm missing something. And I think that's the part that, to your point, so many young, not just young, but I think anybody that has played at a high level or that has had some struggles with pressure or anxiety or whatever you want to call it, have, you can sense that. And, and I think to your point, we were a generation even a little bit before you where Now you got to be tough. You can't let anybody see that. You can't let, you can't be vulnerable. Well, I think that was really not the way to go. and I think if people say, well, you shouldn't talk about it, if I can help just one person or two people, then that's better. If I can help even more, I'd like to. But there's a lot of folks that struggle with that. And when you talk to them, or when you get them to open up, they'll tell you, man, I was struggling with this, or this was tough for me. And you want to make sure they understand, hey, look, if you need somebody, just call me, because we've all had that. No matter how many accolades you have, or how many All-American teams you made, how many trophies you won, how many championships, those things will not make you whole when you get to that point where you're feeling like there's nothing else or nobody else that understands you.
Yeah.
I think. And I'm not qualified to be an expert on it at all. I can just tell you how I would, counsel somebody if they come to me. And I have had young players, as they transition out, that will open up and say, okay, look, let's get you in this direction. Do you know what you want to do?
Yeah.
That's all I know how to do.
I think it's so important. I appreciate you just sharing your story and talking about it, because I think the importance of that is that maybe there is somebody out there, a sports parent, a coach, an athlete, whoever, even if it's a non-sport or non-athlete out there, that's like, wow, Charles and Prim felt this way. Because I think it's so easy when we're down and out to feel like this is just our experience and nobody else is feeling this way. And when you're down, it's really hard to reach out. It's really right, because it's hard to muster up that energy when you feel like the entire world is on your shoulders. So, talking about it, I think hopefully validates anybody else that's talking about it. And, when you mention when sport wasn't a part of your life, you didn't feel whole. It's like something is missing. And it makes sense, because you lost this part of you that has been a part of your whole life, really up until that point. Yeah. And you were asking why. Like in that moment, you were asking, why do I feel this way? And so kind of finding the answer to that. Yeah. How do you think your childhood contributed to how you felt in that moment, in the sense of growing up in Beaumont, Texas, where football was everything, football capital of the world? How do you think your childhood contributed to that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I was born in Beaumont, grew up in Houston, but spent a lot of time in Beaumont in the summers. And, that at one point in time, that was the Golden Triangle, Orange, Port Arthur, and Beaumont. Not a whole lot there. Refinery town, rice town, rice fields, which was interesting because after the Vietnam War, there were a lot of Vietnam refugees that migrated to that area. And it's funny, just kind of made me think about it. One of my buddies down the street, his mom was Vietnamese and his dad was Black. And she could make some of the best damn Vietnamese gumbo there was, because it was spicy, Orlando was his name. It was great. But what that's you had awesome. You had a melting pot. Now, it was still very segregated at the time when I was growing up. It was whites on one side of town and blacks on one. And that was Texas in general. But when you move to Houston, it's a little bit more open, more diverse. Still problems because you think about the times in the 70s and 80s. But growing up, if you played ball, you were the person, whether it was middle school, whether it was high school. When you became a star, you were a star. I mean, it was weird, especially in football. I mean, it was something about wanting to play and be, at first for me, it was baseball because I love baseball. But then as I started getting bigger and faster and stronger, football, that became my identity. And I think I had to think about that. It had been my identity for so long that when I felt like it was taken from me, how would I replace it? I think that's the part. And instead of saying replace it, how do I supplement it and move on and just kind of put it on the shelf because I can't do it anymore at that time, but that's still going to be a part of me, but how do I add to it? How do I do different things so I don't feel like it's completely over?
Yeah. Yeah. So you said it's been such a huge part of your life, if not the majority, at least up until you were 27, 28 years old. So what are your first memories of football entering your life?
I mean, it was just watching Oilers games or playing Pop Warner football. It's funny. We had some really good coaches that coached us, but a lot of the guys that played in my Pop Warner team, one was OJ Brigance, who was a year behind me, and OJ, played a long time in the league. Now he has ALS, but he's been battling that. He still works with the Baltimore Ravens. A great inspirational story. But OJ was one of my teammates. Reggie Moore, who I played college ball with at UCLA, played in the league for a few years. Lance Blanks was a major basketball player in Texas, and ended up playing in Detroit for a while in the NBA. Ivan Jones played college basketball, and I think he played overseas. Will McClay, who's now an executive with the Dallas Cowboys, he was on the team. His dad was a coach. We had Sid Blanks. We had some, when I think about it, and just in that Pop Warner, that team there, we probably had 6 or 7 guys that played college or pro basketball or football. So it was, you competing early on. I think that's what I remember. I learned how to compete because if the only way you were going to get on the field, even as a youngster, you had to be able to compete. And that's what I remember about football and just any sport that I played. We had some really good players in the area that I grew up in. I mean, Andre Ware and I were talking about that the other day. Dre grew up in League City or Dickinson, ended up winning the Heisman Trophy at U of H. But in the summers, we would come back. Reggie and I would go over to U of H and work out with him, and then the Oilers guys would be out there working out with us. So, you learn how to compete at a pretty early age. And if you're catching passes from Dre, who's a future, high round draft pick and Heisman Trophy winner, and then sometimes you'd even see Warren Moon out there. So it was a spirit of competition, but it also taught you, man, you got to be ready. You have to be ready.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, your childhood is crazy unique. You went to Willow Ridge High School, which was in Houston, right? And so, and when you were there in the 80s, I mean, it was known for its football program and producing a number of NFL talents, including yourself, right? Because OJ was there, Alan Aldridge.
Alan Aldridge, Eric England behind me, but Thurman Thomas, who's in the Hall of Fame now, was older. Thurman and I didn't play football together, interestingly enough. We played basketball. I couldn't even make the varsity football team until I was a junior. It was so deep.
Wow. Wait, you didn't make the varsity football team until you were a junior? Did I hear that right?
Yeah, so I was a junior.
That's insane.
So I moved away. My mom moved to St. Louis for a couple of years in middle school. So I really started focusing on basketball and baseball. And when I came back, I was able to play baseball, varsity baseball early and basketball. But our football team was so doggone good. I could have played on the varsity, but I wasn't going to play. I was like, no, let me go somewhere. And I had a really good coach, JV coach, Belton Narcisse, who probably should have been our head coach when the other coach left. But he said, look, if you come play for me, I'll really work with you and you'll get a lot of chances to play. So I didn't play varsity till my junior year, but the sophomore year on the JV probably did me better because of that experience. I got the chance to play, I learned. And then, Thurman and I played basketball together because I was more of a basketball guy when I first, and I was thinking I didn't keep growing. I thought I was going to be about 6'6", 6'7", and I stopped. So that was a perfect position for a tight end.
That's great. Well, I would imagine that every athlete has one of those stories. I mean, Michael Jordan got passed up, for making the varsity team in high school. I just had Lindsey Harding, former Duke and former #1 overall pick. She got passed up for the Nike camp and McDonald's All-American game. And look what she ended up doing. So, I mean, those stories are just in the dozens and hundreds and thousands. Talking about your childhood, the conversation about your experience and race and how that intersected with your athletic journey. So here you are in Texas. And even though it was a bit more diverse in Houston, but nonetheless, it was during the 60s and 70s and 80s, a period where it was very segregated and also continues to be honestly segregated in Texas. So did you feel as though being a football player and being a really good athlete, were you able to hop some of those or hurdle or chip away at those barriers that existed because of your race being a Black child?
Yeah, I think you feel like you can until it confronts you. Like there's always times that you think, okay, just because it's not in my face, doesn't mean I don't know it's there. But I don't go looking for it, right? I never did. But you knew, even, I can remember in high school, we were playing a team and, at their place, and, their guys were just throwing M-bombs all over the place on the field first. And, but then the stands started doing it. So, I'm pretty calm, cool, and collected, but at a certain point, I go to first base and I can hear it because that's on their side. And I was going to go in their dugout and get a bat and go in the stands. My coach had to come get me and say, "Hey, look, we'll beat them on the field," which we ended up doing. And the whole time, I'm thinking, hey, their coach is going to say something to them and his fans to tell them to back off. It didn't happen. Nonetheless, I get back to school and I get a letter or something from our athletic director, who's a white guy. And we always kind of felt like we were the odd guys out because Willow Ridge was a predominantly Black school. We had some, folks, some Hispanics, a few white kids, but it was mainly a Black school. The other schools in the district were more white. And he sent me something and said, I need you to come in and see him. So when I went in, I had one of my coaches with me because I was like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen here. He wanted me to apologize to the school and the fans for my behavior. And I said, no, I'm not going to apologize for that because I was there. Yeah. And coach understands what happened. But if you want to suspend me or do something like that, you can go ahead on and do that. But I'm not apologizing for defending myself or my team. And luckily, it didn't get to that. But it made me think you always have to speak up for who you are, or what you are. I don't go looking for it, but if it comes, find me. I have no problem dealing with it.
Wow. Just hearing that, that's really, it's frustrating. It's angering. It must have been hurtful, obviously. What do you think your childhood would have been like growing up in Texas without sports?
I think it still would have been good because I had such a close-knit family. That's the one thing too that I think about having all my family. My dad had 10 on his side, 10 brothers and sisters, and my mom, 6 of them all together. So a pretty nice extended family, even though I'm only child. So I think even without sports, I would have had the luxury of having a lot of family and growing up with, in a cool time with relatives that were, you could spend time with. They would, treat you really well. And I think football only enhanced it because I got a chance to meet other people and get teammates that, and bond with for life. I think that was the one thing that, playing sports helped with.
So you really think that your general experience, your general childhood experience would have been the same, but what about you as a person and where you are today? Mm-hmm. How do you think you would be different? Maybe had you not been an athlete?
It made me. I got to see things earlier. I got to travel more earlier as an athlete. Get out of just that space. Get to travel and go do things that maybe I wouldn't have if I didn't leave and go to UCLA from the state of Texas. I don't know. I think it opened doors that maybe would have opened later, but I got a chance to see things at an early age. At 17, I'm going off to college in Los Angeles, although I had been there before because, here's the other thing that's great about growing up in the South. there's also, you have extended family in from Louisiana and Texas that go to Los Angeles or California because of the migration of African American folks that want to get out of the South, whether it was Florida up to New York. But I had a big contingent of family in Northern California and Southern California. So I had already been out there growing up. So when people say, well, what made you want to go to LA? I said, I'd go out there for a couple of summers and go hang out with my cousins and relatives in California in middle school. So I got a chance to see California. I'm like, man, this is a pretty cool place. If I could ever come back here, I would. And I ended up going to school out there. So yeah, I think just from a historical perspective, I got to see things earlier. So it made me open to the world and understanding, there's places outside of where you actually are, where you grow up, I think is what taught me.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear that you think that you just experienced things earlier. I often kind of reflect on my experience with tennis. And sometimes I kind of pose the question of who I would be had I not pursued tennis in the way that I did in such an intense manner. A lot of people know that at 12, my mom and I went to the tennis academy. So my parents weren't divorced, but they split up to help, allow me to pursue my dream in tennis. And of course, I go to this tennis academy. I'm training 5 hours a day. So I often wonder, would I be the person that I am today? And it helped me become much more outspoken and much more confident. I mean, when I think back to myself in Mexico, Missouri, I mean, I was very gregarious and loved friends, and I was very social, but I was extremely shy. I was very shy. I did not have the first word that comes to my mind is balls, but gumption, I'll use gumption as a more appropriate word. But I feel like today I have so much more gumption compared to had I not been in sports. And so that's why I pose that question.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, when you have a certain level of confidence or the ability to know that you have a voice, I think sports gives you a voice. Sometimes we can go the total opposite and become egotistical with that voice, or we can say, let's use it when we need to, and I'm kind of like you. I'm not by nature, I probably was a little quieter, a little more reserved. But as I got older, I wasn't afraid to speak if I saw something that I didn't think was right, or didn't feel like it was good for me. I could say, no, this is how I view it. Because sometimes people want you to say what they want you to say, and I'm like, nah, that's not me. Yeah.
So what did you learn from your transitional period in leaving football? What did you learn from that whole period in your late 20s?
I learned that how to reinvent yourself and how to, not think so much about what you do as who you are, but what's inside of you, or how you can evolve. I think that's a big thing. I tell people there's a certain evolution of things that you have to do in life, and you don't always know when you're going to have to evolve, but you have to be ready to evolve. I think is what that taught me.
Mm-hmm. How long do you think that reinventing process lasted for you?
It's still going on. I mean, I don't think it ever stopped. Yeah. I don't know. I think I've been cognizant enough to know that you probably have to just kind of keep doing some self-reflection and evaluation periodically, because if you don't, the same thing can happen to you, or you can get caught in that cycle, right? And so, no, I think I know I consistently still think, okay, what am I doing? How is this working? I have to constantly do that. I think that's what it's taught me, how to be cognizant of things around you, but also things within yourself.
Such a great answer. I agree with everything that you just said. I think it's a continuous process of constant self-reflection and being aware, trying to figure out where you are in life, where you want to go. And I think oftentimes in today's society, especially with the younger generation, I feel as though they feel the pressure to make a decision and to kind of stick with it. But I don't know if they think it's forever, But I mean, we live in at least from a professional standpoint, I mean, the job market is so much more volatile than it was many years ago.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to have the permission and freedom that it's one thing, we have to know how to be committed to something, but then also fluid.
Yeah.
Because we're always evolving.
Well, and I think COVID taught us too how you have to make sure you're really flexible. I think what's funny is people act like, oh, that never happened, but it was a time where we had to all kind of figure out changes and doing different things. I mean, it's kind of what made me start a podcast, just talking to people like you and other friends, because we couldn't get out and we weren't able to go, and Zoom became a lot of our best friends, but it also allowed us a chance to do some self-reflection and introspection of things that were we doing everything that we needed to, and that we need to change some of those things.
Yeah. Next week, I am going to visit a university and talk to their athletic staff. And the conversation is focused on care and care for student athletes. And so with regards to just the transition and leaving sport, what do you think what would you tell your 27-year-old self as you were on the cusp of leaving football? What would you have wanted to know?
That's a good question and a good thought. And I think it becomes now what I would have told my 23-year-old self or 22 as I was leaving college, right? Because as I was leaving college, I'm thinking I'm going to be a first-round pick, ended up being a fifth-round pick, get cut, have to work through the process of making a team and then making a team. What I would have told my 27-ish, 28-year-old self is, don't just say you're preparing for life after football or tennis or golf, but really be vigilant about how you're doing it. Like, you can go get internships and try to fool everybody else on the outside, but really be thinking how your plan B or plan C is going to look. Because you may play, the athletes you're going to talk to, some of them will get an opportunity to play much longer past college. But quite a few of them, that's where it's going to end. So making sure that you're preparing for that and using that time where you had as a college athlete to leverage yourself to get into the next job that you're going to do. And really being honest, because I don't know if I wasn't really honest with myself that it was going to ever end or when it was going to end,
Yeah.
I think that was the issue for me.
Yeah. So really being honest with ourselves. And I think that's the toughest part. That's the toughest part. Really. And
finding people around you that will force you to do that. Because I think what happens is we get insulated as athletes, get a lot of yes people to tell you, oh, you're great, you're this, you're that. But having somebody that can challenge you and say, okay, no, this is what you have to do, or this is where how much time you may have or you might not have. So are you doing these things? Really having almost a coach for that post transition.
Yeah. Well, that's where the Next Chapter Academy is going to come into play. So I can create a staff so we can help coach athletes through this, and veterans and whoever else that needs that kind of help. But Seabuck, as always, it's been such an honor to hear your story. I appreciate you opening up and going deep and dealing with all my questions. But where can people find you this upcoming season?
Yeah, I'll be on ESPN and some other platforms doing college football games. I mean, you can find me on Twitter, you can find me on Instagram, all the social media channels. I'll probably be posting everything there. But yeah, first week of the season, I have UNC at App State, which would be a great game up in Boone.
Fun.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to it. It should be a great season.
That's awesome. Well, Seabuck, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. And it's an honor. I hope you can come back on the show sometime.
All right. Thanks a lot, Prim.
Really hope you enjoyed today's conversation. For more episodes, just visit our homepage, The Next Chapter with Prim Siripipat on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts. And just a friendly reminder that you can also watch the full version of all these episodes on YouTube. Just search for the show name, The Next Chapter with Prim Siripipat. Subscribe to us, like us, give us a star rating. We really appreciate you listening and, of course, supporting us. The Next Chapter with Prim Siripipat is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.